year, the Lancet Medical Journal just did a piece on adolescent health and mental health. It's very comprehensive. There's a link to it in the slides. And just one of their key messages and recommendations were, and I've highlighted there in red, donors and volunteers should redirect their funding and efforts to community-based and family-based programs. Next slide, please. So following best practice and the UN guidelines and the way that governments across the world are moving now, even it's a complex, it's a slow process. It has to be done with the just the safety of the children and young people involved, just at the forefront. But in terms of the care continuum for vulnerable children, for vulnerable adults, institutional care is no longer on that continuum, but rather between a child being living with their birth family and an institution. There are many different alternatives, and these are alternatives that are increasingly being highlighted to find what is best and including those affected in the decision making. But institutions, large institutions, are no longer deemed appropriate for the care of vulnerable children and vulnerable adults. Next slide, please. So just to finish off, I just really want to highlight for you, we're only able to open the box here, and it's far too brief, obviously. We can't go into all the different issues involved. But next May, here's a date for your diary, as part of the Vivid Consortium project work. We're going to have 3 days in May, 11th to 13th, 2021, with high-level experts, one of whom is working with the Kenyan government on their policies to progressively transition from orphanage and institution care back into alternatives within family and community. And we're going to spend 3 days exploring best practice and also just the tools and how you go about working yourselves or with partners to make that transition possible in the safest way. Next slide, please. There are lots of global movements working on this, and just here's a snapshot of a few of them, and there's links to them in another slide. I hope Sandra from COLOV is with us. We've been working a lot with COLOV here in Ireland. If you haven't heard of them, please do look them up online, colov.org. Next slide, please. So it's just so that you see, there's links to where the videos are. Next slide. And there's different links just to the global networks we were talking about and the article that I referenced there in the Lancet. I think that's probably it. Thank you so much for giving us this platform to share about this important issue.
Thank you, Emma, and thank you, Katie. That was absolutely fascinating, very moving. Obviously, it's a topic and a theme that has been uppermost in our minds in Ireland in particular, and I think Ireland probably has learned a lot, and I can see that coming through your presentation. So thank you very much for that. That was really interesting. I think we have a little bit of time for questions now, so I'm just going to check to see if any questions have come in. Just bear with me for a moment.
Conrad, if I could jump in, I did see one question there that we just think that just in the rest of the world, what's the situation about the number of orphans with parents? I think in Ireland, we often think the word orphan is meaning without parents. How often is this the case in other parts of the world? Just research from across the world is telling us that 8 out of every 10 children in an institution has at least one living parent. So excuse me for cutting across you there, but that's what they're just telling us.
That's great. I can't see any other questions coming in there.
Conrad, you might.
Okay.
I'm just wondering, do you want to give some of the experience of that you were familiar with in terms of the Irish situation? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to have a quick in fact, it's the question. I mean, the thing I was really disturbed about with your presentation, Emma and Kate, is this notion of orphanage tourism. And I think that's really an important point, because a lot of people, they're fascinated by, people who want to volunteer. They think helping in volunteers is a good thing. Helping in orphanages is a good thing. And it does remind me of that sort of phase when Ireland sent a lot of volunteers over to Romania, you'll remember, and Ceausescu's Romania, where many children, particularly children with disabilities, were discovered locked up in orphanages, and it was hidden for many years. So we saw a lot of missionaries and volunteers and even the religious going over there to help, and it was a very emotive period. So I suspect I can see that this whole change that's coming through now is definitely a positive thing. I guess the question for me is, how do you see volunteers with disabilities actually helping out in this area? So I know you're talking about children with disabilities within the orphanage. Do you see a role for people with disabilities helping out, whether it's a community-based, whether it's something to do with the existing? I know we're trying to move away from institutions, whether it's something to do with the area of institutions, advocacy. Well, where do you see their role, the volunteer?
Thank you, Conrad. That's actually one of the reasons that we are so keen to be part of this consortium. Since this project has started earlier this year, we've been learning a huge amount from our partners. So this is something that we're actually hoping to learn more from. We are not, as Tearfund Ireland, we work overseas on this issue, but we are not direct implementers. We work with partners who are working in this area on the ground. So in fact, that is something actually that I will go to our partners and actually ask them about, and we can feed back again.
Yeah, it was just looking at the research, Sharon's research. It did mention that people with disabilities don't necessarily always want to work in that area of people with disabilities, which was an interesting observation in that report. So hence the question is that people with disability want to do, but they don't always necessarily want to work in that field. So I was just interested to know whether you have a demand, or if you've seen an interest from people with disabilities to work with children of disabilities. That's really where the question was coming from. So I think we'll wrap up there, Emma and Katie. I think that was really interesting. The next session is a conversation, if you want to call it, with Dr. Pascal Cabura. If I can see him there. It's a conversation essentially with myself. Is Pascal online?
Yes, Conrad.
Oh, great! I can see it. So welcome to the conference, Pascal. It's lovely to see you again. So Dr. Cabura,
nice to see you.
Nice to see you. So just to give by way of introduction, Pascal. So Pascal is a Catholic priest based in the diocese of Fort Portal in Uganda. He's a director at Uganda Martyrs University, and he's a clinical supervisor as well as CEO of the Bishop Magambo Counselor Training Institute. So he is a doctor of psychology, a psychologist and a psychiatrist, and he's a person that is a good man to go to if you want to know how to understand human behavior and and how to deal with sending volunteers over to difficult places. So welcome, Pascal. Just a bit about myself, so you sort of just understand me. So I'm only recently working in this sector myself. I joined Via Tours Christi last year to help and manage one of their EU funded projects. And the EU funded project is not this particular project, but it's around volunteering and capacity building and technical building. I obviously have an interest in Africa. My father's from Africa, from South Africa. I'm also Irish. So I'm very interested to hear from you, your side of things from the African and Uganda perspective. And I thought it would be good for us to kick off with looking at how COVID has impacted your work in Uganda and your community. How has that impacted you?
Thank you, Conrad. Hi, everybody. Greetings from Uganda, and a pleasure to have you all and to be part of this family, this discussion today. I thank all the presenters and the participants, and greetings from the rainy portal area of Western Uganda. Conrad, COVID-19 has indeed had a great on our work and communities in Uganda, like it has in many other parts of the world. Our life will perhaps never be the same again. I can pick out a few ways in which we have been affected. As a psychologist, one of the most, perhaps the greatest impact is the uncertainty of life. More than ever before, our life and our work and community is filled with a lot of uncertainties. Since March this year, we live day by day, not sure of what will be announced tomorrow. During the total lockdown period, we were waiting for government or Ministry of Health announcements to tell us what to do, what we had to do. Now that lockdown has been lifted, it is even worse. We notice that not even the Ministry of Health or government has got all the answers. Everybody has been humbled to say, we do not know. This makes planning even harder. Life in Africa was already filled with uncertainties. Even with things that are taken for granted in Europe and other parts of the world. Take, for example, whether power is going to be on or not, whether water will be running the next day or not. Those were uncertainties we were used to, but now it has been intensified. Another great impact is anxiety and fear. Uncertainty of life has created a lot of anxiety and fear within individuals and within communities we work with. Individuals are anxious almost about every little thing, every incident, every death, about job security, relationships. And then we continue to live in this state of fear of such things as a simple sneeze or a simple cough, a rumor that someone has died of COVID. We live in fear. Another impact is on the community disengagement. COVID has had significant impact on social cohesion by having people disengaged from each other. Since most of our work with people, we experience this disengagement, leading to more vulnerability that takes forms of emotional hang-ups, domestic violence, and severe mental illnesses. When our community outreach has been scaled down because of COVID, we have had an increase in number of clients in our mental health clinic for counseling, and we have referred many for psychiatric care. This disengagement is a spiritual experience resulting from a ban on elaborate and crowded funerals, church activities, wedding parties, introduction parties, open air markets, family celebrations, which were part of the African living, community living. For many people, a ban on these activities rendered life spiritually stale and sometimes meaningless. Another impact is, of course, the obvious one. The economic impact of COVID has made worse the already hard living conditions of many of our people whose employment contracts have been suspended, arrears not paid. Fortunately, our institute here, for Bishop Magambo Counselor Training Institute, since it employs very few staff members, they were not affected. But communities were badly affected, especially in the area of medical services where people could not afford even over-the-counter medication. On a positive note, though, food production has increased since March to July. This happened because of two major reasons: good rainfalls and increased labor. Most of the people were not working, they were staying home with their children, and therefore they increased to work on their gardens and their farms. So that is how, in brief, Conrad, this is how COVID has affected us and our work.
Thank you, Pascal. That's really interesting. And how has it impacted volunteer situation? So you have been working with Viators Christi for a long time, many years, and you've received lots of volunteers. What's actually happened with the voluntary sector in your country? Just briefly, just to let people know.
Yes, indeed, Conrad. I have worked with volunteers now for 20 years from Europe, VMM and other sending organizations, and also from the United States. Now, COVID indeed disrupted volunteering. At our institute here where I work, we had 2 volunteers. One of the volunteers managed to travel back home just one day before the lockdown. Whatever she was doing went to a standstill. We were not sure what would come next. Another one of our volunteers had gone home for a short holiday, only to return on the last day, on the last of the flights, and was put on quarantine for 14 days. This one was able to resume her work after the 2 weeks. The COVID experience has taught us, or rather convinced us, of the need to have expatriate volunteers work closely with the local counterparts who can immediately and with minimal support carry on the mantle. This is what happened, and this is what we did with the case of one of our volunteers who never returned. Working with VC, we talked with them and worked out a system where one of our staff, local staff, took on the responsibility, and since she was already working close with a volunteer, she took on the responsibility that the volunteer had, thus minimizing the interruption. And this was a very big lesson for us. We have always practiced having a local person work with a volunteer, but this time COVID has shown us how important this arrangement is. And it has worked very well for us.
So do you see that as an indicator of changes in the future? I mean, do you see this as perhaps starting a trend of using more local people?
Ago, I learned a saying that you better change, because if you don't change, change changes you. So there is no going back. We have learned from this experience, and certainly the volunteering work has to change, going in the direction of how our experience has taught us.
Okay, that's really interesting. And I think that's sort of messages coming through some of the discussions this morning. It might be worth us just looking at disability. I'd be really interested to know, Pascal, from your perspective, you know, what is the environment like for people with disability in Uganda, and what are your views on receiving volunteers with disabilities in Uganda, whether the environment is able for this, whether you do it already. You know, I'm completely new to this in terms of how sort of the landscape looks like in Uganda.
Well, working, the whole subject of disability in Uganda is not new. The government has got policies and laws regarding disabilities. It has put in place policies with regard to disabilities, with children in schools, equal opportunity for people to work at work. But unfortunately, most of these laws and policies are just on paper. They are written. In practice, you don't see much. So I would say, given the policies that we have and the inclusive laws and arrangements that we have, yes, I could receive and work with people with disabilities. But my only challenge is, if these policies and regulation and laws are not put into practice, then we may face challenges. You get someone with a disability, but maybe there is no way which can take a wheelchair. They are still to carry this person onto the third floor, or there is no arrangement in the parking lot for a disabled person driving and having a nearby parking for them. So that is the only challenge that I see happening. It has to be, it take time, it has to be very slow. When these laws and regulations are implemented and the physical infrastructure is prepared for this kind of arrangement, then I see it can work. In the meantime, though, we can begin by having a few trials which would require prior preparation, both on the part of the receiving organization and on the sending organization, clear supervision of the facility and the area where the organization where the volunteer is going to work, if he's coming, that's if they are coming physically to work there. And once that is done, then a few trials can happen for a volunteer to come physically and work in Africa, in Uganda. In the meantime,
Hello, Pascal. I seem to have lost your voice. Are you there?
when that is happening, online volunteering, which has been talked about. Are you able to hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, I'm sorry, I don't know where you stopped hearing me, but I was talking about, in the meantime now, when these infrastructures are not yet ready, and when these trials are carried out, online volunteering could be a very good start, whereby disabled people living with a disability in Europe and elsewhere can offer their expertise, can offer their skills, share their skills, not necessarily traveling to Uganda or to any of these global south areas.
Okay, that's interesting. So do you think that the facilities, you know, the infrastructure technology is of a good standard in Uganda? So you see possibilities and opportunities there, or do you think that maybe perhaps some of the groups in Uganda may need funding to improve the technology, or how would that work?
Well, Conrad, you just experienced it now, right now. When I was talking you just said you lost me. So that's a challenge already. But it's better than nothing. A few years ago, maybe only 5 years ago, we couldn't hold a Zoom meeting like this one. Right now, at our university, we are having Zoom classes with a lot of challenges, but I think it's a good beginning.
Yes, I agree. I agree. So, Pascal, have you any reflections on the research that you listened to this morning? Any views?
Well, I was really impressed by this rapid research. I don't know what rapid means, whether it meant it was done so fastly, or someone was running, or fast reading, or fast interviewing, whatever it was. But I think it was very informative and very educative on, especially on online volunteering, this new whole perspective. I think more work needs to be done with specific examples. Say, for example, of the receiving organizations, more trials can be done so that this research can be the beginning of a resource for policy making, for receiving organizations, and also for sending organizations, but also a very good resource for policymakers in governments, especially in the third world countries.
Okay, now that's really interesting. So you took a lot out of that report. I can see. I guess perhaps more research within countries like Uganda may shed more light on this area. Just one final question for you, Pascal. You listened to some of the discussions around localization. What are your thoughts on localization? What does that mean for you?
Well, what it means is localization, meaning a skill that is brought in by a volunteer in the context of volunteering, a skill that was lacking or was wanting, or it needed to be polished, or it was a contribution to the other existing skills. Now, instead of having a volunteer do the whole thing, but having a local person work with the volunteer, learn from the volunteer, where the volunteer learns from the local person, and perhaps even this skill is honed and customized for the local, to meet the local needs. So this localization is, in the first place, empowering the local community. Secondly, harmonizing the needs of the volunteer and the receiving community. Thirdly, it is customizing whatever skill it is for this specific community. In the example that I gave already with one of our volunteers who left, and then our local person took on the mantle, she's been in communication with the sending organization, answering questions and giving information. It has already worked. That's an example of localization. The skills that the volunteer was using are now picked on by the local person. And I think it is a very good practice which can be employed. Every volunteer who goes, get ready. You never know when you will leave. And when you leave, what happens? So you, being a Catholic priest, I can say what Jesus did. He came into the world and he made sure that he had disciples. So let me call it this way. Localization is like discipleship, creating disciples, so that when you are away, someone else can take on the mantle. I think it's a very, very powerful concept to be adopted.
That's great, Pascal. That's really very interesting insight. So thank you very much for that. And I think we've covered quite a lot. Rapidly, I know you had a problem with the word rapid, but we've gone through everything rapidly, which is great. And we'll move on to some questions now. I'll just check to see what sort of questions have come up. Just bear with me for a second. Oh yeah, so from Lou to Pascal, I would love to hear from Father Pascal, particularly about the impact of COVID on people with mental health issues and psychosocial disabilities.
Yes, only yesterday I was carrying out some supervision with some of our counselor trainees, and I had a very bad, nasty case to handle, where one of the disabled disabled child, mentally challenged during COVID-19, was sexually abused. A girl of 12 was abused several times, but because of the lockdown, the parents couldn't access help, they couldn't access police, they couldn't access medical care. So it's only now that they begin to take care of their daughter. So yes, COVID-19 has affected a lot of people, but certainly the disabled people, since they are already challenged, they are already having problems, I think COVID multiplied these challenges.
Yeah, that's interesting. So we have another question here from Lou again. Would Bishop Magambo, I guess that's the university, be a particularly good placement for volunteers with psychosocial disabilities? So I guess it's questioning how your country or your organizations can receive people with disabilities as volunteers, but in particular Bishop Magambo.
Yes and no. Yes, in a sense that Bishop Magambo Counselor Training Institute, being a mental health care facility, has a better understanding community, which would be able to receive a person with a disability and orient that person to work with very well. So yes, it's possible. But no, in a sense that if the disability is a challenged movement, like I have already mentioned, if it is to go upstairs, or if it's about to have better walkways on the street, if it's have wheelchairs, if it's have motorbikes, tricycle motorbikes, that could be a challenge, because some of our volunteers have tried motorbikes called borders here in Uganda. And some of the people who have been here, Shane could have seen this, and Sally, and even Susan Lakes. So in that sense, yes, it can be quite a challenge. But if it is a disability that is not that severe, yes, in terms of receiving them and working with them, I think this community would be able to work with them. Other than that, online volunteering would be another possibility.
One that comes to mind, my own mind, is the report talked about people with disability advocating for the whole area of disability. So where, for instance, there's a stigma attached to disability in anyone's country, that perhaps what could be useful are people who have that experience, they know about it, and they're vocal and they give voice to people with disabilities. I mean, that's potentially an area. If you're saying that the laws that are not being implemented in Uganda, perhaps you could take advantage of the online, facility to help you promote, the work around disabilities in general. It's a thought.
Yeah, you see, Uganda is a very welcoming country. They welcome visitors and they treat them very well. This particular town of Fort Portal is actually called the Fort Portal Tourism City. And in that sense then, if you have a volunteer with a disability, is likely to be seen as a model, in which sense that person will not only be serving as a volunteer, but also as a model which can reduce that stigma, reduce that mentality that if someone is disabled cannot do this or do that, or should be treated differently. But if they see someone is able to do this and is a visitor, is from a foreign country, it has got a double benefit. One, the work will be done, but the other one will be also this person presenting themselves as a model and perhaps influencing community that way.
Excellent. So they could be a really good role model
Role models, exactly, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. There's one question from the, I guess we'll leave it this last question from Rhea. There are many strong organizations of persons with disabilities in Uganda. It would be interesting to hear of local persons with disabilities if local persons with disabilities would be interested in volunteering with, for example, with you, Father Pascal.
Say that again?
So the question is, you know, it would be interesting to hear if local people with disabilities are interested in volunteering for you, Pascal. So are the local people with disabilities interested in volunteering in Uganda?
Yeah, just a few days ago, someone visited me, and he runs an NGO for the people living with a disability, and he wanted to come and do a diploma in counseling so that he will be able to help people with living with disabilities. So we have had clients come here who are having disabilities, and yes, so it's possible. I don't know whether I got the question right.
Yeah, I think you did. I think you gave a good example there that people do want to come learn and be part of society in Uganda, and you and I guess your organizations would be opening to receiving these people. And I guess the important point also is the idea of the role model. But to get, again, role models need to be in Uganda, not online. I guess that's the issue.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay, thank you very much, Pascal. I think that's been really interesting, and you know, it's great to meet you again. And thank you for your time and all the insights that you've given us. It's been fantastic, and I think it's time to wrap up now. Unless Shane, you want to say a few words, but I might just give an overview. Shane, did you want to come in there?
No, just I just wanted to thank Conrad. If you want to go ahead, or go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank everybody, all the attendees, for participating and listening to us. It was a long day. There was a few technical problems, but we got through it. It is the first time that we have done this with disability in mind, you know, accessibility and inclusion. This is really very new for us, and this online technology is so new. We're all learning as we go along. So you know, I've learned a lot today, and I think we all have in the Vivid Project learned a lot, and I hope the attendees also have something to take away. The slides are available afterwards. And I guess some of the key themes we touched on around localization are important, but I think to remember that some of the key figures that struck me, you know, 1 billion people in the world, you know, suffer from, or not suffer, but have disabilities. 1 billion, you know, that's a big number. And, you know, and also to think that, you know, within the area of institutionalization, that people with disabilities are 17 times more likely to be institutionalized. So these are really important statistics that are coming on, and I would advise you to go back and look at this research. I think there is an element of uncertainty around the future of online volunteering. There are many questions around you know, funding of this and how we implement online online volunteering? What does that actually mean? What are the objectives to come out of that? So I think there's probably more questions than answers today. But please go away and email us, contact the Vivid team and VC. We'll be more than delighted to respond to any of the questions that you've got. So I think that's generally an overview. Do you want to add anything, Shane?
Yeah, just thanks very much. I want to just thank you, Conrad, for facilitating and for supporting us today. Conrad, as he says himself, is joined us relatively recently. And he has been a great asset. I just want to also thank sincerely Father Pascal for the last session. Father Pascal and I go back a long way with VC as well. But I particularly want to mention Colette Rooney, who has worked tirelessly with the rest of the team, Maria Gonzalez, the Vivid team, Zrinka, and all of those. I think I want to thank all of the panelists today, the interpreters, the captioners, the recorders, the video production people, Adrian O'Farrell, who put together the videos, really everybody that attended today also. We have members of the EU, we had Irish Aid, we had Mission Cara, we had a lot of people here. And again, I'm just so grateful. It is a lot of work. It is a huge amount of work to try and be accessible. We're learning, as everybody says. I think we did a reasonably good job today as a first start, and it's certainly an eye-opener. So again, thanks a million for everybody, and hope you have a good evening. The report, Sharon, I forgot to mention Sharon and Molly and all of them involved in the report. That's available, and it will be available. We'll let you know about that. Please do the evaluation. Let us know if there's anything that we could have done better. We're trying our best. Thanks again. Good night.
Thank you, Shane. Take care. Have a good day. Thank you, everybody.
Great. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Colette.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks to everybody.
Thanks and bye.
Everybody.
Bye, Rhea. Thank you.
Well done,
Thanks,
guys.
everyone.
You
Thanks,
nailed
Colette.
it.
Thanks, Colette.
Thanks, Rhea.
Thanks, Colette.
Thank you,
Thank you, Father
everybody.
Pascal.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Katie.
No, well, I just moved everything away.
Okay.
You got back okay, Colette?
Oh yeah, I did. Yeah. It took me a while to get in. Okay. So I'm just going to close down the meeting now, if that's okay.
I think so. We're all exhausted. Thanks, Father Pascal. Good to see you.
Thanks, Pascal. Thank you. Bye. Hi, Nora. You're muted. Nora, you're muted.